1 week before our marking ceremony, my alpha mate, Cora Black, looks me straight in the eye and says something unbelievable. I want to have a pup with my longtime friend Willow. At first, I assume it's a terrible joke, but I see determination in his serious expression. I suppress the churning feeling in my stomach and ask him why. He sighs, his gaze gentle as if he's soothing an unreasonable child. Willow's old beta father is dying. His only dying wish is to see Willow have a pup. We're doing it through IVF, so it won't hurt our relationship. Her father devoted his entire life to the pack. You wouldn't refuse to fulfill even his dying wish, would you? You wouldn't be that cruel, right? I don't know how to respond. He speaks as if not letting my fated mate have a pup with another woman is selfish. Later, when I go to visit the gravely ill old beta, Cora is holding Willow Lester in his arms. His hand gently strokes her hair as he lets her sob against his chest. The moment our eyes meet, pain strikes my very soul. My wolf lets out a desperate howl of anguish. I stumble away, only to receive a text from him on the day of our marking ceremony. Honey, Willow and I are undergoing the IVF procedure. Let's postpone the ceremony for now. I stare blankly at those words, my hand unconsciously moving to my still flat stomach. Since he wants so badly to have a pup with another woman, I will grant his wish and disappear with my pup. Cora Black and I had arranged for our marking ceremony to take place this morning, but now evening had already arrived. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the moon goddess hall, and the air was filled with the fragrance of evening primrose and roses. Every pack member had dressed in their finest attire, their faces originally blessed with smiles as they waited to witness the sacred moment when their alpha and his Luna would be mated. Those smiles had long since turned to impatience. I stood inside the moon goddess hall, wearing a Luna gown woven from moonlight silk. My parents stood beside me, their backs straight, but their clasped hands betrayed their unease. Time passed minute by minute. The golden sunlight gradually gave way to twilight, and the guests' whispers grew louder. Cora, my alpha mate, never appeared. Every second was torture for me, and equally torturous for my father, the pack's gamma leader. Father took a deep breath and stepped forward. His deep, apologetic voice echoed throughout the moon goddess hall. Thank you all for coming tonight. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, today's marking ceremony cannot proceed. I offer you my deepest apologies. In that moment, all eyes pierced us like needles. I could feel Mother's body trembling slightly as Father endured the humiliation, and led us in bowing apologetically to all the pack members. The pack members instantly erupted into discussion. See? I told you the alpha never took her seriously. So what if her dad is a gamma? He's just the alpha's lapdog. Did she really think she could become Luna? Getting publicly humiliated like this is so embarrassing. Should keep it down. Is the alpha's business something we can gossip about? Do you have a death wish? Ha! Dying would be better than living like this and watching others tear your dignity to shreds. I held back my grievances and didn't let the tears fall, but my wolf was howling in anguish. The crowd gradually dispersed. My friend angrily rushed over and grabbed my hand. Anya, this is too much. How can Cora treat you like this? Stop talking. My friend's mother pulled her back, shaking her head with eyes full of wariness. Yes, he was the alpha. He was the pack's leader, possessing absolute authority. Even though he had committed such an unforgivable mistake, no one dared to openly criticize him. The pack members' sympathy and my friend's anger could only transform into silent sighs under the alpha's shadow. I shook my head, feeling something lodged in my throat, unable to speak. Just moments ago, I had still clung to a ridiculous fantasy, ready to call him and beg him to come hold the marking ceremony. But as soon as I pulled out my phone, I saw that Willow Lester had posted an update on social media. In the photo, a bouquet of fresh flowers was arranged in a vase, bathed in bright sunlight by the window. It looked vibrant and full of life. The caption read, "Another day full of hope. I hope a miracle will happen, and I hope Father's illness will improve soon." The next second, Cora's comment popped up, so fast it was as if he had been waiting by his phone. "Everything will be all right. Don't worry, I'm always here." So, on the day I had been joyfully preparing to become his mate, he had chosen to accompany another woman. The churning nausea in my stomach could no longer be suppressed. I rushed into the bathroom and began retching violently. Looking at my pale, disheveled reflection in the mirror, I finally understood that his heart was no longer with me. I wiped the corner of my mouth, returned to my room, and sent Cora one final message. Cora, you've betrayed your vows to the moon goddess and your promises to the entire pack. You've made me and my family a laughingstock in the pack. Come back now, and it can still be salvaged. After sending the message, I placed my phone on the nightstand and lay there with my eyes open waiting for even the slightest hint of guilt or attempt to make amends. However, the phone screen never lit up again throughout the entire night. Outside the window, the sky changed from black to white, then revealed the first rays of dawn. My heart also died bit by bit during this endless wait, finally turning completely cold. I removed the moonstone ring he had given me. I then personally tore the Luna gown, which symbolized both honor and humiliation, into shreds and changed into the black training clothes of a Gamma warrior. I pushed open the door to the pack's council hall, and I walked straight to the 5-pack elders and said in a calm voice, I want to sever the mate bond with Alpha Cora. Please tell me how to do it. My words made the air freeze. The elders all looked up in unison, staring at me in disbelief. After all, in the 100 years since the pack's establishment, there had never been a precedent of a Luna actively requesting to dissolve a mate bond. Our head elder was Rodney Marok, and he was also the oldest werewolf in the pack. He slowly set down the documents in his hands, his face unreadable. His voice was aged but powerful. Luna Anya, once a mate bond is formed, it cannot be dissolved unless both parties are present and the other party consents. My stomach had been uncomfortable from constant bowing yesterday, and combined with staying up all night, my face was extremely pale. But I still straightened my spine and met his sharp gaze without flinching. What if the other party doesn't agree? Then, unless you can provide ironclad evidence of the other party's infidelity, proving he has betrayed his mate vows, only then can the Elder Council invoke the Moon Goddess's power to forcibly sever the mate bond between you. Elder Rodney continued gravely, until you find evidence, you cannot let anyone know your intentions. Otherwise, this will damage the pack's reputation. I fell silent. Where was I supposed to find evidence? Walking out of the council hall, my phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket. It was a video from Willow. Willow's face was flushed, her expression filled with undisguised smugness, and showing off. She held a test result in her hand, waving it triumphantly at the camera. Anya, I'm expecting on the first try. You haven't been able to conceive for so long. There isn't something wrong with you, is there? Oh, sorry, I don't mean anything by it. I just think you should go to the healing center for a checkup. After speaking, she said coquettishly to the man beside her, Alpha, tell Anya that our IVF was successful. She'll definitely be happy for us. The camera then turned, and Cora's figure appeared prominently in the frame. I could tell he was trying to control his emotions, but those eyes flickered with barely concealed joy and pride. Honey, the healers all said I'm amazing for succeeding with IVF on the first try. Before long, I'm going to be a father. Willow is with pup now and needs someone to take care of her, but her father is sick and hospitalized. I plan to bring her home and have you take care of her. You've always been reliable, so I'm at ease. Willow's lips curved into a victor's smile as she said smugly, Anya, I'll have to trouble you to take care of me from now on. You won't mind, will you? Looking at those two glaring smiling faces on the screen, my heart felt like it was being gripped tightly by an invisible hand. The pain was making it almost impossible to breathe. Yesterday he had just missed our marking ceremony, making me and my family the laughingstock of the entire pack. Today he wanted me to take care of a woman who was carrying his pup. Was I really that worthless in his eyes? Grievance and heartache flooded over me like a tide. I could no longer hold back my tears, and they slid down my cheeks. With trembling hands, I pressed the save button, keeping it as evidence of his betrayal of his vows. A bitter laugh escaped from my throat. When exactly did our relationship start to sour? We had been together for 10 years, and had once shared countless sweet moments. He would suddenly pin me against the wall at the training grounds, smiling as he kissed me. Babe, you looked so dazzling drawing that bow just now. I couldn't help but want to kiss you. He would apply medicine to my wounds when I was injured, his fingertips lingering on my skin deliberately, watching me blush and my heart race. He would also press me firmly into the bed when I prepared surprises for him, whispering in my ear, "Are you trying to drive me crazy? How can I not be obsessed with you?" But 2 years ago, when Willow, who had been studying in neutral territory, returned to the pack, everything slowly began to change. When I got injured during training, he would frown and ask how I could be so careless. When I prepared surprises for him, he would only impatiently tell me not to bother with such useless things in the future. It seemed like he could no longer see me. Later, he spent more and more time with Willow, so much so that he would even miss our family gatherings. I remembered one family dinner where Corey was over an hour late again. I couldn't help but complain a little, but my parents didn't take my side and said, "Anya, Corey is the alpha. He has to worry about the entire pack, and is already very tired. You need to be more understanding." When Corey finally sat down and announced dinner could begin, Mother tried to ease the atmosphere with cheerful small talk. "Corey, I think I saw you a couple of days ago when I was in town. You were shopping with a young lady, and you two seemed very close. Who was that?" The moment Mother finished speaking, Corey's face instantly darkened. He didn't say anything and just ate in silence, but that expression was more frightening than any accusation. It was as if my parents had done something wrong. They were flustered and trembling with anxiety. The rest of the dinner was suffocatingly awkward. From that day forward, Corey had a rift with my parents, and he became even colder toward me. I could endure everything he did to me, but how could he treat my parents this way? They had always treated him like their own son. How could he bear to make them so hurt and sad? Just because Mother's innocent comment had displeased him, he punished us with his cold treatment. And I had once foolishly made excuses for him with ridiculous justifications like, "He's too tired," or "He's just repaying the old beta's kindness." I hypnotized myself into believing that if I was understanding enough, I could win back his former affection. How ridiculous of me. It wasn't until today that I finally woke up completely after seeing these two shameless faces in this video. He wasn't tired. He had simply given all his tenderness and patience to another woman. Our relationship was completely over now. My stomach had been uncomfortable yesterday when I bowed and apologized to the guests at the Moon Goddess Hall. After leaving the council hall, I went to the healing center. After the examination, the healer looked at the report with a delighted smile on her face. "Congratulations, Luna Anya. You're with pup. You're already 7 weeks along." With pup. I instinctively placed my hand on my still flat stomach, feeling somewhat dazed. A pup with Corey. This news was like a ray of light, instantly shining into my heart that had been shrouded in despair. Corey and I had been together for 10 years without having a pup, which had always been his regret. Perhaps this pup's arrival could salvage our crumbling relationship? However, the flame of hope that had just ignited was extinguished by a message from Corey. He explained, "Knock it off. You know I've just gone through the IVF procedure with Willow. We'll hold the marking ceremony another day." No explanation, no discussion, as if he were announcing something as trivial as what to have for dinner. In that moment, my heart died completely. "What's wrong? You look terrible," the healer asked with concern. I came back to my senses, took a deep breath, and pushed all my emotions back down. "Could you please keep this confidential for me?" The healer was stunned for a moment, then smiled knowingly. "Of course. You want to surprise the alpha, don't you? Don't worry, now that you're carrying the pack's heir, you'll definitely be the future Luna. The alpha will surely value you more this time." No, I wouldn't be Luna anymore, because I had already made up my mind to dissolve the mate bond with the alpha. I smiled bitterly and didn't explain further. I took the pregnancy report and turned to leave the examination room. I dragged my exhausted body home, but the moment I pushed open the door, I was shocked by the scene inside. In the living room, Willow was grasping Corey's hand, pressing it tightly against her stomach. Willow's father was looking at them with loving eyes, as if watching the most perfect pair. When Willow started to get up, Corey immediately supported her nervously, murmuring, "You're with pup now, be careful." Don't move around carelessly. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting light on them. The scene looked so warm, so harmonious, like they were a true happy family of three. Meanwhile, as the actual mistress of this house, I seemed like an intruder who had barged in. Seeing me, the laughter in the living room stopped. Willow was the first to react. She greeted me warmly with a bright smile. "Anya, you're back." I looked at her, and a huge wave of bitterness rose in my heart. I felt as if all my strength had been drained away, opening my mouth but unable to make a sound. My silence made the smile on her face freeze. She bit her lip pitifully, turned and hugged Corey's arm, saying in a weak voice, "Corey, Anya looks so upset. Does she not like me? Or is she unhappy about this IVF pup?" Corey shook his head and patiently comforted her. "No one dislikes you. You're with pup now, which makes you someone we need to protect. Sit down quickly and don't run around." I couldn't be bothered watching their performance and turned to go back to my room. At that moment, Willow's father shakily stood up and looked at me with loving eyes. "Anya, I know you feel like this is unfair, but Willow is carrying a pup now. She lost her mother when she was young, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of her from now on." Willow immediately leaned over from Corey's embrace, smiling as she said, "That's right, Anya. I'll have to trouble you from now on. I have some ladies' talk I want to discuss with Anya. It's not convenient for you two men to hear, so please step out for a moment." Corey and Willow's father immediately nodded with smiles. "Of course. It's more convenient to have a woman take care of things. You two chat." After speaking, they left the room and thoughtfully closed the door. The moment the door closed, the smile on Willow's face immediately disappeared, replaced by undisguised provocation and smugness. "Anya, stop making that sour face. You can't compete with me." I couldn't be bothered to acknowledge her, and turned to leave. The instant I turned around, she suddenly let out a piercing scream and deliberately slammed her waist hard against the corner of the nearby table. "Ah!" She clutched her stomach and collapsed to the floor in pain, shouting toward the door. "Corey, save me. Anya pushed me and wants to make me miscarry our pup." The door was violently thrown open as Corey rushed in. Seeing Willow on the floor, his eyes instantly turned red. He helped Willow up, the disappointment in his eyes louder than any slap. "Anya Thorne, are you insane? You're trying to murder the pack's future heir. How can you do something so vicious out of jealousy?" I pressed my dry lips together, not knowing how to explain. In the end, I could only say in a voice filled with despair, "If I told you I didn't do it, would you believe me? The evidence is right here, Anya. How can you expect me to believe you?" He looked at me with eyes full of heartbreak, as if looking at a traitor. "Apologize right now. If you don't apologize, I'm not holding our marking ceremony." I looked at him and laughed. "Fine, then let's not hold the marking ceremony. Come with me to the Elder Council right now and dissolve our mate bond." Corey completely didn't expect me to say such a thing. After being stunned for a few seconds, he asked me with a heartbroken expression, "Anya, how far do you want to take this? Are you really going to destroy our 10 years together before you're satisfied?" "Yes, since it's already rotten to the core. I might as well destroy it." I looked at him, my eyes numb, without a trace of warmth. My response was like a bucket of ice water, extinguishing all his anger. My answer made him panic. The alpha, who had been so domineering moments before, now softened his tone. "Anya, don't say things out of anger. Willow and I really are just trying to fulfill Victor's dying wish. I don't have any other feelings for her." He was anxious to explain, but I noticed that Willow, standing behind him, had a flash of delight in her eyes when she heard me mention dissolving the mate bond. And Victor Lester, who had been clutching his chest and coughing, had stopped coughing and straightened up. "I understand. It's fine." My tone was so flat it was as if I were talking about someone else's business. He looked at me skeptically. Really? Really? If this had been a few days ago, hearing him say these things might have still caused me heartache or made me argue. But now, my heart had turned completely cold. I couldn't feel even the slightest ripple of emotion. Looking at his nervous expression, I even found it somewhat ridiculous. But my response made him sigh in relief. He thought I was just throwing a tantrum, and that coaxing me would make everything better. Corey immediately put on a serious face and turned to scold me instead. Anya, don't ever mention dissolving our mate bond again. It's very hurtful to our relationship, understand? He didn't even ask for my opinion before making his own arrangements. I've decided. Tomorrow we'll make up for the marking ceremony at the Moon Goddess Hall. Tomorrow Willow and I will go together to support you and see who dares to gossip, Victor quickly chimed in. Willow linked her arm with Corey's, smiling sweetly. That's right, Anya. Tomorrow we'll all be there to support you. I watched their coordinated performance and found it incredibly ironic. That won't be necessary. My father already announced publicly to all the pack members at yesterday evening's marking ceremony that our ceremony was cancelled. I interrupted their beautiful fantasy. The color instantly drained from Corey's face. He stared at me in shock and only after several seconds managed to speak. What did you say? Who said he could make that decision on his own? Didn't I say it was just postponed? Anya, the alpha only said postponed. How could you cancel it? That's so inconsiderate of you. Willow immediately jumped out to accuse me. Victor also joined in twisting the facts. That's right, Anya. You and your father went too far this time. Just as the three of them were taking turns blaming me, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Elder Rodney from the Elder Council standing outside. He held a document in his hands and handed it to me with a serious expression. Anya, the Elder Council has reviewed the video evidence you sent. Fill out this paperwork and we can forcibly dissolve your mate bond. We'll fight for the maximum benefits for you and your pup. Elder Rodney's words exploded like thunder in the living room. Corey stared at the documents in my hands in disbelief, his tall frame swaying as if he couldn't stand steady. He suddenly turned toward Elder Rodney, then fixed his gaze firmly on my face. For the first time, panic appeared in his eyes, and his voice was trembling. Anya, are you serious? Over such a small matter? Why are you doing this? And what pup? Small matter. I repeated those words. My heart felt like it had been pierced by those two words, but the corners of my mouth couldn't help curving upward in a smile that looked worse than crying. Before I could speak, Willow had already collapsed, crying into Corey's arms, her delicate shoulders shaking continuously. It must be because of the pup in my belly. It's all my fault. If it weren't for my dad, things never would have turned out this way. Anya, don't dissolve your mate bond with Corey. I'll get rid of the pup tomorrow. As long as you two make up, I'll do anything. Victor also beat his chest, his face streaked with tears. It's my fault. I'm an old fool. Alpha Luna, please don't let us hurt your relationship. Their acting was superb. It was as if I were the villain destroying their happiness. Corey held Willow tenderly, looking at me with eyes full of disappointment and blame. It was almost like he was looking at an unreasonable lunatic. Just then, from the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something pearlescent on Willow's neck. It was a moonstone necklace, identical to the one I wore around my neck. A chill ran from the soles of my feet straight to the top of my head. This necklace was the token Corey had given me after he marked me. I would never forget that night when he personally put it on me and whispered tenderly in my ear that the moonstone could protect wolf souls and witness our eternal love. But now, another identical necklace hung around another woman's neck. A sharp pain pierced through my heart. It was 1,000 times more painful than being publicly humiliated in front of the Moon Goddess Hall yesterday. I could no longer control myself. I reached up and yanked the necklace from my neck. The metal chain scraped across my skin, leaving a glaring red mark. Without even glancing at the necklace again, I simply raised my hand and threw it into the nearby trash can. The crisp sound stunned everyone. Anya, what are you doing? Corey completely panicked. Without thinking, he pushed Willow out of his arms and rushed over to retrieve it, but then felt it was beneath his dignity and could only frantically explain. I didn't give her that necklace. Willow bought it herself. She saw how nice it looked on you and bought one for herself. Is that so? Well, it doesn't matter anymore. I no longer wanted to argue with him. Anya, don't be like this. Corey tried to step forward and grab me, attempting to salvage something. For the first time, His voice carried a hint of desperation. Just then Willow, who had been pushed aside, suddenly let out a cry of pain. Her face turned deathly pale as she clutched her stomach with both hands, her body sliding limply downward. On my stomach it hurt so much. Willow's scream startled everyone in the living room. Corey completely lost it. He roughly shoved me aside and rushed over in a few quick steps, carefully lifting Willow into his arms as if he were afraid she might shatter. His eyes turned red as he whipped around to glare at me with such hatred that it seemed like he wanted to tear me apart alive. "Anya!" he roared so loudly that the entire living room echoed. "I'm telling you, if anything happens to her and the pup, I will never forgive you." He carried his beloved and swept past me like a whirlwind. The wind that hit my face was both cold and painful. He didn't even glance at me, as if I were some unforgivable villain. The door slammed shut with a bang, and the world suddenly fell silent. In the living room, only Elder Rodney and I remained, along with my heart, which had shattered all over the floor. The Alpha went too far in this matter. Elder Rodney's voice sounded aged but firm. He looked at me with a hint of sympathy in his eyes. Just that one sentence, and I couldn't hold on any longer. All the grievances I had been suppressing suddenly surged up at once. I didn't cry out loud, but my tears fell like broken pearls one after another. I forced myself to stand straight, walked to the table, and picked up the documents and pen. My hands were shaking terribly, and I could barely hold the pen steady. Every word I wrote seemed to drain all my strength. My life, my 10 years with Corey, everything I valued more than life itself was ending with each stroke of the pen. After writing the last word, I handed the documents to Elder Rodney. My voice was unnervingly calm, as if I hadn't been the one crying just moments before. "Elder Rodney, thank you for your trouble." Elder Rodney took the documents and nodded. He placed his hand on the top of my head, and chanted an incantation I couldn't understand. Then a white light enveloped me. The moment the bond was severed, an indescribable agony exploded from the deepest part of my body. It felt like someone had carved out a piece of flesh from me while I was still alive. My whole body shook uncontrollably. I couldn't hold back a cry of pain, and collapsed to the floor, cold sweat instantly soaking through my clothes. 10 years of entanglement, love, and hate were all severed in that single moment. After the pain passed, there was only an empty, hollow feeling. I couldn't feel him anymore. I could no longer sense Corey's joys and sorrows, and feel that connection that had made me both cry and laugh. I was free, but it felt like my heart had been hollowed out. Elder Rodney helped me up. Looking at my lifeless eyes, he sighed again but said something that left me stunned. "Child, if you want, I can help you change your identity and go somewhere no one knows you, to start over." My heart skipped a beat. He arranged a fake death plan for me, thoroughly thought out in every detail. He told me to pack a few simple things. He had found a trustworthy ferryman who would meet me at the river mouth downstream, and take me to neutral territory under cover of darkness. In that moment, as I looked at the elderly man before me, my heart was filled with nothing but gratitude. I thanked him and said my farewell. That night, the wind was particularly strong. I stood at the edge of the Pax cliff, the cold wind whipping my hair and clothes wildly. Below the cliff was darkness, and the sound of the waves was like the roar of wild beasts. I folded the coat Corey had given me and placed it at the cliff's edge, leaving a suicide note on top of it. Then, I followed the small path Elder Rodney had told me about, and disappeared into the dark night without looking back. Behind me lay the place where I had lived for over 20 years, and ahead lay an unknown future. My past, and the Luna named Anya, would be considered dead from today onward. It would be as if I had fallen into the sea and drowned. In the corridor of the healing center, the sharp smell of disinfectant made Corey feel agitated and restless. He was burning with anxiety, his mind in complete chaos. Willow had been wheeled into the emergency room, and there was still no news. Meanwhile, my pale face and resolute expression lingered in his mind, impossible to shake off. Just then, 2 young nurses walked past him. Their conversation pierced his ears as clear as day. "That expecting she-wolf who was just taken into the emergency room, is she okay?" "She was just frightened, but both the mother and pup are fine. The ultrasound shows the pup is very healthy and already 2 months along." Corey's body instantly froze, his blood seeming to congeal in that moment. He suddenly straightened up and grabbed the two nurses, his eyes as fierce as a predator. What's the name of the expecting she-wolf you were just talking about? The two nurses turned pale with fright, stammering, "Her name is Willow Lester." Corey released them, but his chest felt like it was being crushed by a massive stone. Just then, the emergency room door opened, and Willow was wheeled out on a hospital bed by a nurse. Seeing Corey, she immediately put on a pitiful expression and reached out to grab him. "Corey," the healer said, "our pup is fine." "Whose pup is it?" Corey's voice was cold as ice. "You'd better explain this clearly. The ultrasound shows the pup is 2 months along. What the hell's going on?" Willow's face instantly turned deathly pale, her eyes beginning to dart around frantically. "I don't know what you're talking about," she still tried to lie. Corey completely ignored her and instead stared intently at one of the nurses he had grabbed, commanding, "Repeat what you just said." The young nurse was so frightened she was almost in tears, stammering, "Her pup is already 2 months old, and it's very healthy." Faced with ironclad evidence, all of Willow's pretenses were torn to shreds. She broke down crying. "It's not what you think. Corey, let me explain. 2 months ago, I was drugged and assaulted by a rogue. I wasn't willing. I didn't dare tell you because I was afraid you'd be disgusted with me." Corey listened to her tearful explanation expressionlessly, but felt a wave of unprecedented disgust in his heart. He had actually hurt me again and again for such a lying woman, and for a pup that wasn't even his. He had even missed our marking ceremony, turning me and my family into the laughingstock of the entire pack. He didn't want to look at Willow for another second. "Guards," he said coldly. 2 Gamma warriors immediately walked in. "Throw Willow and Victor out of pack territory." Corey's voice carried no emotion. "From today on, they're not allowed to set foot in the pack again." After dealing with all this, the irritation in Corey's heart didn't disappear, but became even stronger. He drove home to the house that belonged to us. The house was empty and silent. I wasn't there. Corey frowned but didn't think much of it. He arrogantly assumed that after all this fuss, I simply wanted him to care about me more. Now that he had dealt with Willow, he could come back and pacify me properly, and I'd naturally come down from my high horse. He even thought with some impatience that she-wolves were so troublesome, always using these hard-to-get tactics. Just then his phone rang. It was his most capable beta, Eli Fenrir, calling. Corey answered the phone with an irritated tone. "What is it?" On the other end, Eli's voice was trembling. "Alpha, something terrible has happened. We found Luna's coat and suicide note on the seaside cliff. It looks like she's jumped into the sea and killed herself." "She jumped into the sea and killed herself?" When Corey heard those words, his brain buzzed and went completely blank. In that instant, his entire world collapsed. "That's impossible." He let out a beast-like roar, his phone slipping from his hands, shattering the screen into pieces on the floor. He rushed out of the house like a mad wolf and drove frantically toward the cliff. Only one thought consumed his mind. This had to be fake. This had to be another trick I was playing to force him to come back. However, when he stumbled to the cliff's edge, Eli and several other werewolves had already gathered there. Seeing him, they all silently stepped aside to make way, his gaze fixed on the familiar coat at the cliff's edge, held down by a rock with a piece of paper beneath it. That coat was the first gift he had ever given me. The paper was my supposed suicide note. He knew that handwriting all too well, and every word cut through his heart like a knife. "Corey, it's been 10 years and I'm tired. Since what you want is someone else, I'll step aside for her. Goodbye forever." Corey's pupils contracted sharply, as if all his strength had been drained away. His knees gave out, and he collapsed heavily to the ground. A gust of wind swept over, lifting the light suicide note, and carrying it into the roaring black waves below the cliff, where it disappeared instantly. Just like me, it had vanished without a trace. He knelt at the cliff's edge for a long time until his entire body was frozen, then was helped up by Eli like a soulless puppet. He returned home in a daze. The house was filled with traces of my life, but now he could never find me again. He wanted to search for something I had left behind, even just a little bit, to give himself some comfort. He pulled open a drawer, looking through our photo albums. A thick album was pulled out, and as he opened it, several papers slipped out from between the pages. It was a pregnancy test report. He opened it with trembling hands, every word weighing like a 1,000-pound boulder crushing down on his heart. Anya Thorne. 7 weeks with pup. It was exactly when we had last been intimate. Corey's hands shook uncontrollably, barely able to hold on to that thin piece of paper. He had lost me, and he had killed our unborn pup with his own hands. He roared in despair as regret and agony flooded over him like a tidal wave. He curled up on the floor like a dying, trapped beast, writhing in pain. From that day on, he locked himself in his room, refusing to see anyone. When the door opened again a month later, the alpha who had once been so high-spirited now had completely white hair. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in neutral territory, I welcomed my new life. I cut my long hair short and changed into practical training clothes. With my Gamma Warrior skills, I quickly established a foothold in this place where the strong were respected. I used my own fists to carve out a peaceful haven for myself and my unborn pup. When the residents of neutral territory learned that I was with pup, everyone who usually seemed rough and unrefined all showed me genuine kindness. One day, someone would bring freshly made muffins. The next day, someone else would bring fresh fruit. They looked at my gradually swelling belly with eyes full of blessings. I sat in the courtyard, stroking my belly and feeling the strong heartbeat of the pup within. My face finally showed a long-lost smile. Here, I was no longer the Luna who had to look up to an alpha. Without the constraints of status and the constant worry about my feelings for Corey, I was simply myself, a she-wolf about to become a mother. I felt a freedom and peace I had never experienced before. After my death, the once high and mighty Alpha Corey was completely crushed by overwhelming grief and regret. He resigned from his position as Pack Alpha, handing everything over to his beta. He became a traveler without a destination, carrying a simple backpack and wandering day after day between different packs. Used endless journeys to numb himself, trying to dilute that bone-deep pain. The years left their mark on him. His former high spirits were replaced by weariness and desolation, with only that striking white hair silently telling the story of that unbearable past. Years later, he was traveling as usual when he accidentally entered a neutral territory. The marketplace here was bustling with life and full of warmth. The sounds of vendors calling out and people bargaining filled the air, which was permeated with the sweet aroma of baked bread and fresh fruit. Corey moved indifferently through the crowd, completely out of place with everything around him. A familiar yet strange figure suddenly entered his field of vision without warning. At a fruit stand not far away, a woman was bending down, gently wiping juice from the corner of a little pup's mouth. Her profile looked especially gentle in the sunlight, her face carrying a kind of serenity he had never seen before. It was me. Corey's breathing stopped completely at that moment. He felt like he'd been struck by lightning, all the blood in his body freezing. He stared fixedly at that figure, afraid it was a hallucination born from his lovesickness. No, it wasn't a hallucination. That face, even after all these years, was still clearly etched in his mind. She isn't dead. She's alive. A surge of wild joy instantly shattered all his rationality. He pushed through the crowd desperately like a mad wolf, rushing toward me. Oh no. Hearing that voice, I was startled. It had been a long time since anyone had called me by that name. I slowly turned around, and my heart tightened when I saw it was Corey. The peaceful life I had worked so hard to build seemed to crack in that moment. He stood before me, trembling with excitement, his voice hoarse with disbelieving euphoria. Anya, you're not dead? Thank God, I missed you so much. Looking at him like this, I only felt it was ironic. I spoke coldly. I'm not dead. I'm living just fine. His gaze uncontrollably fell on little Andrew, who was clutching tightly at the hem of my clothes. Andrew was a little over 4 years old, with bright, dark eyes that were curiously studying him. That little face, especially around the eyes and brows, looked remarkably like Corey when he was young. I could see the wild joy and expectation in his eyes. He reached out with trembling hands, wanting to touch Andrew's face. He even stuttered from excitement. Anya, he no. I coldly cut off all his words, pulling Andrew behind me, my tone completely flat. He has nothing to do with you. With that, I took Andrew's hand and, without another glance at him, disappeared into the crowd. Corey didn't leave. He stubbornly remained in this neutral territory. He was no longer that high and mighty alpha. He was just an ordinary werewolf filled with guilt. He used every method possible, clumsily trying to make up for the wrongs he had done to me. He would leave a bouquet of the freshest wildflowers at my doorstep every morning, and he'd follow Andrew from a distance when he was on his way home from school, silently protecting us. Sometimes he would buy Andrew's favorite candy at the market and ask neighbors to deliver it to us. I saw everything he did, but I was no longer interested in romance. I only hoped my peaceful life with Andrew wouldn't be disturbed. I thought our days would continue like this, neither good nor bad, until one day, when a group of rogues invaded this territory. Screams, roars, and sounds of fighting instantly echoed throughout the entire territory. I immediately pulled Andrew into my arms, drew the dagger I always carried, and faced the chaotic situation. However, there were too many rogues. In the confusion, Andrew and I were pushed by the scattered pack into a corner. The rogue leader, a one-eyed werewolf with a scarred face, noticed us. His murky eye gleamed with greedy and cruel light as he licked his lips and approached us step by step. The she-wolf's kinda pretty. She's perfect as my mate. As for the little pup, just kill him. I held Andrew tightly behind me, my expression gradually turning cold. I knew that the possibility of us losing our lives was great. Just as his filthy hand was about to touch me, a figure shot out like lightning and violently knocked the attacker away. It was Corey. He stood protecting Andrew and me behind him like some god. Anya, take Andrew and run. He turned back and roared at me, his crimson eyes filled with resolve. He charged into the pack like a wild wolf, fighting desperately against those rogues. Blood quickly stained his clothes, both his enemies and his own. He carved out a bloody path for us, but was viciously stabbed through the chest by the rogue leader with a blade laced with wolfsbane. Yet he also fought to kill the rogue leader, scaring away the remaining rogues. When everything settled, he fell like a withered leaf, slowly collapsing to the ground. The deadly wolfsbane had spread through his body. I held Andrew, standing in place, watching Corey's life force rapidly fading away. 5 years had passed, and I thought my heart had long since become still as water. But when I saw him fall, my heart still ached uncontrollably. In his final moments, I was finally moved. I carried Andrew and walked to his side. He lay in a pool of blood, his face dark and sickly, his breathing so weak it was barely audible. When he saw us, those unfocused eyes burst with one last glimmer of light. Anya, he tried to lift his hand to touch me, but he didn't even have that much strength left. I crouched down and grasped his ice-cold hand. I then lowered my head and whispered something gently in Andrew's ear. Andrew looked at this strange man before him, his eyes a little timid, but he still called out in his tender voice, "Daddy." Hearing that one word, Corey's body trembled violently, and tears streamed down from his clouded eyes. He looked at us, the corners of his mouth struggling to curve upward in a contented smile, then slowly closed his eyes. Years later, on a hillside behind the mountains of neutral territory, there stood a nameless tombstone. I brought Andrew, now grown into a young teenager, to his grave and placed a bouquet of white roses. "Mom, who's this?" Andrew asked curiously. I gently wiped the tombstone and said softly, "This is a bastard who didn't treasure your mother, but was willing to die for her." I whispered to the tombstone that from now on, all grievances between us were settled. I would have my new life, and I hoped that in his next life, he wouldn't be so foolish as not to recognize his own love. I said goodbye, wishing that we would never meet again.